I was kind of really excited by some of the things that I heard earlier in the session. And I'm feeling, first I wanted it to just be a large, huge thing, and there's something I like about the intimacy of the session. And by the way, I think that is something that our people have difficulty with, and that is intimacy.
Mm-hmm.
And that, by intimacy, we're talking about connection at the deepest level. And really, when you hear, like what Esmeralda was talking about, you hear all the things that we've been talking about, it's about that the healing needs to happen at that level. There were things that Ron Daniels said that people who just came in did not get to benefit from, but what we do, what I do, what Esmeralda does, carries on from that, and that is that he said, you know, there's no politics without culture, and he has come to this understanding of the importance of culture, and that's the work that I did do, and I'm going to try to share that a little bit with you today, and I'm also going to try to rush through some things. But I did want to say, listening, there's a small book that I've done that I really like, and that's Let the Circle Be Unbroken. And it occurred to me that the circle, as we call it, is really speaking to the issues that we've been talking about. And it was developed for students, for young people, to convince them that they were African. And so it had to be, well, how? How am I, in what way am I African? And the answer is in terms of the deep structure of culture and of being. So I would recommend that. And of course, first I've got to republish it. So that's on me. So when you want to know what work am I doing, that's the work, you know, that I'm doing. What I want to do now is I'm going to introduce a paradigm to us that I've suggested to be used to understand us as a people, what's happened to us, and what we need to do. And the paradigm is saying that we can't do any of that without understanding who we are and where we came from. So in my work, I always begin with the African worldview. And I want Jifa, that's my daughter, by the way. There you go, yeah. To put on something that just quickly, we're not going to take a lot of time with this, but this is something to give us a feel of a way of being and a way of thinking that is very, very different, opposing to the way in which we are trained trained to unthink in our behalf in the institutions of this nation, in the European institutions of the Caribbean. And so what you see, there are certain themes that I just want to pick up on here because I think they have relevance for our discussion. And that is, okay, this is our presentation of reality, so to speak. And we perceive of the universe as a spiritual whole. Now, when I say we, I'm speaking as an African person. And I'm putting forth, and of course I got to defend that. Somebody's going to say, oh no, Africans think all kinds of different ways. I'm saying that there's a fundamental way of approaching reality that we share, that if we tap into that, that's our strength. Okay? So, the universe is a spiritual whole. Also, key, I think, is that all being becomes interrelated, organically interrelated and interdependent. Now that has implications for how we live, how we organize, okay, how we think politically, And I don't think that we have been seeing that. We haven't been seeing the connection between how we relate spiritually to the universe, our concepts of spirit, and then how we organize as a people in our own interest. And I want to argue, and that's what I'm arguing for in Let the Circle Be Unbroken, that the two should be joined. That we haven't used that power to organize politically or to think politically. So there's that interdependency. And this concept results in a cultural structure that stresses communalism and communalistic forms and collective forms, which is another thing. We got that from what Esmeralda was talking about. The damage that's been done to us has resulted in us not being able to think collectively or to organize, and to act collectively. So clearly the healing then has got to be in collectivizing. And I believe that this is partly done very intentionally, that the value of individualism, which is written into the European worldview, is then, given to us because I believe that they understand that that weakens us. Okay, that's one of the most devastating things that has happened to us: materialism and individualism. Okay, and if you look at the African worldview, you have a basis for defeating both of those things. You have a basis for another way of looking at reality. So it's like, I'm going to be talking about us coming back to self, coming back to who we are, which goes across all of those divisions of locality, and the accidental thing of which European took who and where and so forth. So that's something which I think is important. It also, this worldview stresses the collectiveness of the person, because the person is perceived not as an individual, but as a person that takes on meaning by being connected to other persons. That's the African reality. So you have a Zulu saying, anybody know it? Say it louder. Okay, it's one of my students there. A person is a person because there are people. In other words, you can't even be a person if you are not in some way connected to other people. You can't perceive of what that would mean. You wouldn't have a real existence. Well, I'm arguing that we can use these concepts now in terms of the healing of our people and in terms of organizing Pan-Africanist or forms and councils and so forth. Another thing is that in the African worldview, we see spirit as energy and as force. We have difficulty talking about spirit. Those of us who have been really, really trained in this European context. Difficulty in talking about that. It becomes, some people call it spookism. I ain't going to name names. Some people say it's not real. Now let's get real. Let's get practical. But spirit in the African concept is about energy. Ain't nothing more real than energy. On all levels. Okay? Force. We are faced with the challenge of making our collective energy forceful. How do you do that as an African people? You come together, okay, as Africans in Pan-Africanist organization. So I'm showing how the worldview can lead us there, okay? All right, I'm gonna move quickly now. Let's just take a quick look at the asili. I introduced a concept of asili in the book Yurugu. I talked about the European asili, which is the cultural seed, the core, that's what we need to get to. Don't try to take all of it down and so forth. I just want to look at something while I'm talking. that we've got to understand what is the core of our culture as African people. Now, what I'm proposing is that this seed originates when we originate. It originates in Africa. But what happens then is that as we move out from Africa, as we are kidnapped, as we disperse, that seed moves with us. A seed, you know, give me an example. Does apple have a seed?
Yeah.
Okay. That seed is going to make an apple.
Exactly.
Okay? Malcolm talked about it with the oven and all of that.
The kids in the oven.
Right?
Yes,
All right. So what I'm saying is the African asili is what travels with us. And so wherever you go, you're going to get an African, but you're going to get a variation, a form of African culture. And it may look different if you don't understand the nature of the seed, the core. But once you understand that core, then you see, oh yeah, that's African. So that Ron Daniels could sit here and talk about how he was in the hospital in Howard recently, and these people were helping him from all different parts of the African diaspora, and some was saying, I learned so much because I learned why my grandmother does such and such from her, who could tell me her version of it. And that's what happens with us. And we have these different things that we do. The reason we do them is because we're African. Okay, but that's the asili, and that's the asili manifesting itself in different ways. Now, the paradigm, very quickly. In the paradigm, I use 3 terms. And the first 2 are essential for understanding what I call African natural development. The first term that I use is ma'at, coming from Kemet, coming from Medunet, from the hieroglyphs. For those of you who aren't familiar with Meduneta is the term that we use about, for our own language. Ma'at representing truth, right order, balance, harmony, righteousness, reciprocity, very importantly. All of these things. We speak of the 7 principles of Ma'at. I'm using it. It's also the divine cosmic order. And that divine cosmic order reflects and manifests itself on different levels in different planes, so that our ancient ancestors were imitating Ma'at in their political organization. Okay, you see the power of that. They also were doing that in terms of personal development, in terms of what you strove to live for. Okay, Ma'at is a spiritual concept, but it has the ability to reflect itself on political concept, and a personal and social levels as well. So I'm using this to represent what I call the spirit of African civilization, or the spirit of African civilizational process. Ma'at, then, truth, becomes the context for our discussion. It's also the beginning. It's also, we could look at it as the cultural womb from which we come. Okay? Once having said that, suppose, let's look at this is going to be my simplistic diagram of natural development. Let's say we move out from Ma'at, as our ancestors were building civilization and creating. They had to have a model. They had to have something that they were working from. It's Ma'at. And they establish a rhythm there to build with and to grow with. All right? So in the process of work, in the process of this real practical world that we have to deal with, it ain't perfect. And we ain't perfect, okay? We trying to be the best we can, but we ain't perfect. And so what happens is you get divisions. You get conflict. Energy becomes dissipated, okay? That's just what happens when people work together. Okay, we got to understand that right now. We got to understand that in terms of this conference, in terms of the work that we've got to do after this conference. So then you've got to have something that you do for those times when you will get that conflict. You see what I'm saying? When you get tired. And most of all when you get confused. Because anybody who pretends that they're clear all the time, that's the person to watch out for. I'm very serious about that. You have to periodically, okay, and that can only happen when you have a cleansing period, a healing process. I call it a recentering that allows you to come back to your center so that you can remind yourself of why you're doing this in the first place. And I'm saying that our ancestors would have this periodic time of renewal, which I'm calling Sankofa. And in doing that, I'm introducing another term. And this term comes from the Akan people in Ghana. It's one of the Adinkra symbols, and people will say, go back and fetch it, meaning go back and get the best of what you have so that you can move forward with clarity. So also we're saying it's return to the source. Well, we're not talking about going back to any romanticized place and want to imitate what was. You're talking about going to your foundation, your source of power and strength, and using it as a point of inspiration and something to help you get clarity in terms of principles of being. So the process of Sankofa is like it allows for a rebirth because you go back to Ma'at. You're going back, but you're going forward. You see that? It allows you to keep building, to keep growing, and we go to Ma'at. Well, then we keep working. Well, what's going to happen eventually? You're going to have that period again when you need you need to get strength again. You need to be re-energized. We do this all the time. But we do it generally in a non-political way. Either we go out to the club, or we go to church, and that's just to feel something again because you've been beaten so down and so forth. What I'm saying is that we need to understand in a way that connects us to the deepest and best parts of ourselves, this process of Sankofa, which can take us back to Ma'at. And so, in the natural cycle, you have the alternation of Ma'at, Sankofa, Ma'at, Sankofa, Ma'at, Sankofa, and it would go on and on. That's made to look like an umbilical cord because it is the connection to the mother. See Ma'at as the mother. See Africa as the mother. And that's our connection of power. In the film Sankofa, how many people saw the film Sankofa? Think about what happens to Joe.
Yeah.
Continually they are disconnecting Joe from the mother.
His mother.
Turning him against the mother. The mother is his source of strength. He don't know that. He's trying to destroy her, and ultimately he does. You see what I'm saying? But in destroying her, what does he do, everybody? Destroys himself. And that's what we've got to understand. That's our relationship to Africa. Africa not just a physical location, although it is that. Africa as the symbol of our origins and of who we are. All right. That's the beginning of the paradigm. Now I want to say some things about culture. Just throw out some things. Culture is extremely important for this whole discussion that we're having. So I'm so glad that Ron said that. And I want to say why. Culture is the grounding of a people's collective existence. Culture is not about museums. It's not about, we have the cultural part. And so then you get some performances, like we're going to do. And where people dance and people, sing or rap or whatever. We call that's the culture. The culture is everything that we do in here. The culture is the thinking, because your culture gives you rules for thinking. That's what they don't say that. But that's what they know, and that's why they put so much energy into cultural imperialism. Cultural imperialism. which is to impose their way of thinking on
Others.
us. And when they do that on us, we cannot think in our interest anymore. Said, enough said.
Yeah.
We all know it, we've all experienced it. But it was intentional. It controlled with culture. You control the mind. Okay? Culture is a powerful aspect of human existence. So much so that it's carried by migrant populations. We talked about that earlier. We can talk about that some more. You know, you see the markets were reconstructed in Brooklyn. You know, we used to have, what's the name of the market? Marquetta. Under the L on 116th Street. That's it, the Marquetta, right? I don't even know if it's, I don't think it's, is it? Okay, because I went by there and it just doesn't look like it used to look. But these are the ways that we take our culture. Problem is, we don't do it with a political understanding. Okay, so that's what we need to do. Culture, I'm saying, is the most important factor in the determination of a people's wholeness. And we know that it represents the totality of a people's collective life. So within culture is created language. Now think about it. That's a very important issue. That they took away our language. What did that do to us? And they continue to do that. In the schools, in the public schools, they will not allow our children to speak in their languages. They tell them, you check that at the door. Why? Because they'll say that has no relationship to intelligence and to learning the things you're supposed to learn. When you're ready to do that, you've got to check that thing that your parents gave to you. You leave that at the door. And I've seen that. I saw that in my daughter's high school where the students who spoke Spanish were told by a teacher who didn't speak Spanish, therefore could not understand them when they spoke. Don't you speak that in this school. What does that do to a person? Language is extremely important. What does it do to a person as you try to change the way you speak? And I'm talking about accent now. And you people from the Caribbean, my people, you know that's true. Because you know you got different ways of speaking. And you know some of our people will never speak in a way that you could tell where they come from. But they could if they wanted to. Okay? To change the way you speak has such implications for how you feel about yourself. It's so deep and it's so painful in terms of the rejection of a core part of yourself. And you see, this is part of the damage of the Maafa that we don't want to look at, but we got to look at. We have to look at it if we are going to address it. Okay, so culture, and that's one of the reasons they do that, is that they know that the language carries with it a worldview, which is antithetical to the European worldview. They know that. That's why they don't want you to speak the way, you know, you speak with your family. They know that. And there was a list of words that was put out in a school in Brooklyn that said that a child would be punished, taken out of the classroom, and I don't know about suspended. I mean, a list that this white dude had done, and it was like saying things like bad.
Brother was on there.
Okay, brother was on there. I'm glad somebody saw it. Can you imagine? And he said, no, you can't do that here, and saw that as, you know, that's like insubordination. Okay, and you wonder about enslavement? And the continuate, that's the same process, okay? All right, so culture, I'm not going to say everything that it does, but human beings need a sense of order for health and for psychic balance. culture gives you that sense of order. Okay? And then I talk about culture being understood as a distinct entity. It is also has content, that is the things that we create make up what is in a particular culture. It is also importantly a context. Culture is a context for the definition of meaning. What is meaningful for human beings is primarily determined collectively and not individually. Okay? And then finally, culture is the process through which we become human. Now that's a strong statement, and I'm going to stand by it, and if I had 2 more hours, I would argue for it. But I'm saying that that is uniquely human, and that's how we become human. The way in which groups of people who are historically and biologically related express their own special humanity through culture. And really importantly is the way in which culture can be understood as the supreme ideological force in human experience. It is which roots them in a systematic explanation of who they are, why they existed, and what they mean to each other. Okay? So one is linked to others through this important, very important sense of cultural identity. Cultural identity, therefore, helps to give direction to one's life and imparts the strength that comes from a sense of unity. Intact cultural identity is necessary for a people to have self-confidence. Okay? Think about all of that in the context of the third term of this paradigm. And the third term is the Maafa, M-A-A-F-A. And let me just get some clarity here. That's a Kiswahili term. And I was looking, I said, I want something that we can use to claim this period of history that we interpreted. We say what it meant. I didn't want it referring to anybody else's whatever, suffering. I wanted it to be ours. And so I had friends around me who spoke Kiswahili, so I said, look, give me a term for disaster. And that's how it came to be. And that was in 1979. Then it just took off. And we had it connected to our spirit. But we use that. That's not about the people who actually created the language of Kiswahili. Right? That comes out of a diasporic consciousness of the need to organize on Pan-African levels. Okay? Okay, so Maafa. Maafa shatters our reality. It takes away our collective consciousness. Maafa, the great disaster. It teaches that the best thing to be is an individual. And non-African at that. The Maafa disconnects us from each other. It disconnects us from our traditions, and it's our traditions that gave us strength. The Maafa can be understood as cultural genocide. Now remember all the things I've just said about the importance of culture. Okay? The Maafa must be understood in cultural terms. It robbed African people of our cultural identity, which in turn acted to prevent collective organization in our own interest. So we have great difficulty doing it. The Maafa is a consistent, systematic, ongoing attempt to separate people of African descent from our cultural foundation and to effectively erase our cultural memory. So that the Maafa is it's a relentless psychic attack and cultural assault against people of African descent. It disrupts culture. The Maafa causes disorganization. We wonder why we can't organize. It causes that. It does it intentionally. And it causes fragmentation. And it causes chaos. in the existence of Africans in America, the Americas, the Caribbean, and on the continent. I haven't even gone into what we have seen happening on the continent of Africa. You see the Maafa on the continent of Africa in ways that at least we recognize it here. There, it isn't even recognized as Maafa, but it is straight up Maafa. So we got a lot of work to do. This work is extremely important. Now, the Maafa can be understood as a force, as a destructive process. The counter force to the Maafa is the resistant, proactive, maroon energy of which Asa Hilliard talks about, writes about. Maroon energy. The spirit of African resistance is always consistently and intimately linked to the affirmation of African cultural identity and retention. You could do a study of that. In fact, Haile Gerima is now doing intensive, the research is really blowing my mind. That's going to be his next film. It's on Maroonage, and not just talking about Jamaica and the mountains. What he's doing is going to blow people's minds here. And it's what we need, what our people need. Okay. The destructiveness of the Maafa is unprecedented and must be carefully understood. And I think I'm not going to keep on doing that. But I am arguing that it is the most destructive act that has ever been perpetrated by one group of people against another. And this claim can be supported. It can be supported quantitatively by the numbers of people who were transported, the numbers who died, the numbers who were killed, the numbers who were enslaved, and the suddenness and intensity of the disruption. Think about that. How will people survive that? Dislocation, distance represented by the physical circumstances of the trade in human lives. The system was also racially determined as defined by genetic, biological relationship, and culture. Okay? African people were deprived of all the accoutrements and factors of the culture with which they were familiar, such as language, belief systems, sanctioning mechanisms, and rituals, and so forth. And we could go on and on. Okay? It is obviously the most severe crime suffered by any group of people ever. We got to keep that in mind. Mm-hmm. This crime lasted not for a year or two, or even 20, 50, or 100 years. Rather, it represented a prolonged period of psychic torture which lasted for over 3 centuries as a legally sanctioned practice. Right. And which continues in present times as an institutionalized and systematic assault against the descendants of the imprisoned and enslaved Africans. Mm-hmm. That's Maafa. Okay? Causing separations and disorientation between us, among us, fear, anxiety, loss, insecurity. This caused deep cultural and psychic trauma, from which we have never recovered. Okay? Now, I think that a legacy of the Maafa is our lack of organization, our lack of vision, particularly. People who are in a state of depression cannot have vision. And spirit affects that. Okay? Wholeness affects that. You have to be whole. in order to have vision and to see yourself as powerful. The legacy of the Maafa is a failure to identify as Africans. In the Maafa, our consciousness becomes disconnected. We lose historical consciousness. Remember Dr. Clark, that's why he talked about that so much, the importance of an historical consciousness and what history means to us. And he did it relentlessly. And reached so many of us. And so many of us now work in the service of our people because of Dr. Clark.
That's right.
Because of what he did.
That's right.
When we lose historical consciousness, we begin to identify our colonial prisons as home. And I think that 911 should raise that question in our minds.
Yeah,
You know,
that's right.
what ties us to this place right here?
Nothing.
Who's to say that we cannot make a home where our home is? But our consciousness in the Maafa becomes, that is, we think as Americans, Guyanese, Jamaicans, Asians. All right? We got to think about, what does that mean? What does it do to your consciousness? Now, I think what I want to do now is I want to quickly, I'm not going to use that check out to jump one. I want to quickly do, yeah, I'm not there yet. Okay, wait, here's what I wanted to do. Just quickly put on the jump. And he raises, jump, I just put this up there to show you that it's not just the African worldview we got to deal with, but one that is totally in opposition to it, and what it creates, let's have the next one, is the European thought form or way of thinking is that their asili seeks power over the other. Their thought system, utamawazo, see, culturally structured thought, seeks to control the object. Their energy force, utamaroho, seeks to subdue and destroy the enemy, and so we see that the other, the object, and the enemy are all one. We become that in the Maafa. The Maafa is the process of defining us as object.
Right.
Okay? Now, where are we at? What happened, G? Oh, okay. Well, then, yeah, I'm not going to do that yet then. Okay, now what I want to do is, I don't even have to talk much. We'll just quickly get by all these things, and let's see what's there. We're going to look at this process, and I want you to be absorbing it. I won't take time to describe the kidnapping, but that's what it would look like. And just imagine yourself in the safest place that you have, your home, your village, your family, and that people come in and they snatch you. Okay? You with me, everybody? I mean, we've got to relive that. You see? And then the going to the dungeons. All right? I won't get graphic because I don't have a whole lot of time. But you can do it. I want you to fill in the lines. Think what that means. Put yourself there because it is you.
That's right.
Okay, let's have the next one. And on the way going to the dungeons, is this, Anjifa, the name called, you tell it rather than me.
Insu Donkor.
Loud, because we
Insu Donkor. And Insu means water and Donkor means slave.
They're saying this is the river of slaves. I don't know why it looks like that. And it's in a place called Asamanso. And that's a wonderful story, which I don't have time to tell you, but the horror of it is, this was a place almost at Cape Coast, where the Europeans, they would stop and say, well, this is the last place that we're going to wash off what they call the slaves, washed off the Africans. And by the way, we should not call ourselves slaves.
Right. Don't call ourselves slaves.
I mean, we do that again and again. And in that term, you erase all of culture, all of history, all of Africa.
That's right. Don't call
You cannot do that. We were enslaved. okay, by terrorists.
Yes.
So you can speak of enslaved Africans, but you cannot speak of African slaves. We're not going to do that.
That's right.
Because in any way that we could do that, that's a negative part of our history that we'll deal with it another way. All right? But the Africans were then taken here and they were supposed to be washed off. What we did was to go into these waters and escape so that either we drowned or we, tried to swim off. Right, Jifa? And so the blood of our ancestors, when you go there, and we go there, you can feel.
But what they said was they
Yes.
would bathe us. See how it's smooth in the back?
Yes.
And it's rough. They would bathe you in the rough part
Okay.
to prevent you from being able to run.
To get away.
Because if you got to the smooth part, it's easier to get away.
Okay. And we would just go away here. Because if we had to be drowned, then we would be drowned. And that's what many of our people did.
Where's that at again?
That's on the way to Cape Coast.
Okay, Kelvin got it.
Okay, so we know Cape Coast is where
Right.
they're going to put us in the dungeons. On the way to Cape Coast, and here we are at Cape Coast. Okay, I want you to feel all of this. Okay, this is the dungeon. Don't ever use the word
Yeah, thank
castle. Not that I can tell you what to do, but this is Mama Marimba, so I'm telling you what to do. There ain't no castle for us. These are the dungeons. And you feel it, you see it,
Smell it.
you experience it, you smell it, and you can feel our ancestors there too. When you go there, you know it's a dungeon. Let's go to the next one quickly. This one, now let me see. I figured it out, Chief. Do it this way.
It's like the door of no return, isn't it?
No, do it this way.
No, that's not.
That's it. Okay, now let's say that's a trap door. That over there is the top. Say you bring that
Okay.
up. These are steps. And they are steps that would come from the female quarters
Right.
of
Okay.
those dungeons.
Right.
Okay?
So the so-called
Now let's
stairs.
go to the next one. Everybody see that? Now that goes this way.
Right.
This is a room. Those stairs, there's another set of stairs after those stairs that go up to the governor's quarters, they call it. That's where he slept.
Right.
During the day, there was a courtyard, and our women would go out there. They'd be put out there. Some would be punished out there. And he would stand up, there's a balcony, and look down there and pick out who he wanted. All right? And at night, they would bring us up those stairs to that room. You can go there. You could be in it. This is another part of the dungeon where we would be pushed from that window up there down here into this room. This was a special cell where those of us who were considered most violent, resisted most violently, would be beaten and beaten and beaten and then put in that cell to die, left to die, not fed or anything, just left there. And they put that cross and skull thing on there. This is what has been called the door of no return. This is at Elmina, where we perform. We go there. We go to this place. Now this is hard to, they didn't do a good job, but that is Naim Akbar on our trip because we perform a ritual at the door of no return where each of us goes up to that door. Yes, it's powerful. It is so powerful. This is what you're going to see. This was taken this summer.
Dr. Ani,
Yes.
I've been to Cape Coast Dungeon. There's some brother and sister from New York.
Yeah, I know.
Really about
Yeah, One Africa.
One Africa.
Yeah, we
They
see
do-
them all the time.
Yeah.
You should see what we do.
Oh, I bet.
Oh.
Yeah, it's powerful.
And Naeem and I
Powerful.
had to take, how many people did we take? It was 225 or something like that, people through these dungeons.
Yeah.
And Wade and Tawede, who's here, took 225 through the other one.
Okay, and then Elmina.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, next. No, you can't go. Okay, this would be us taken to the ships. Us on the ships. Wait, hold. Don't move too fast. This I thought was important. Just so we can get an idea of what this all means in terms of, we're talking about these demographics and all that kind of stuff, right? So this is the diaspora and the creation of the diaspora. Now I want you.
And there's an arrow from Europe to West Indies and North America too.
Okay, that's right.
And from Mexico on the West Coast to North America too.
Okay. So we need to do this, and we need to. Our students need to see that. That's okay. No, yeah. Next one. I put this one in. It's really from another period. I put it in here because to me it looks like what it must have looked like on the auction block. Okay, so that represents that. And there are marks on the brother's body from the whippings and the beatings and so forth. So now we're into Maafa as it existed in chattel enslavement here. And I could give you a list of laws, because that's one of the things that Europeans do, is they have this behavior, this inhuman behavior, this immoral behavior, and then they make it legal. And that has always been their pattern, by the way, from Roman times, is this whole thing, got this pride about the codification of laws. You can make anything a law, you know, and for something to be legal, what does that mean? What does that mean? That only means that they've got a sanctioning force to back that up. Okay? Now, so this is Maafa, and this is what Maafa meant. It meant that this is what happened to our mothers. Understand the pain of that. I feel very great pain with this. This is Maafa. Go ahead, Jim. And this is what happened to our children in the Maafa. Okay, and the Maafa continues. Now we come to the the third thing of the paradigm. Remember in the other one. Hope you all can still remember. Very neat and the process of Ma'at, Sankofa, Ma'at, Sankofa. Maafa, somebody said pathology. I see it as a pathological tissue that disrupts the normal functioning of and the organicity of us as an organ, so that the blood can't go through, the juice can't go through. You see what I'm saying? And we get stuck in there. It's a rupture that breaks that connection to Ma'at. So then the Sankofa really cannot take place as long as you accept Maafa, which is denial of spirit, by the way, okay, based on lies. And it throws African into a dependency syndrome, where we become dependent mentally on